guess if you're spending money on something or you're investing time in it, then it kind of helps itself along. So, usually if you can get a good first few weeks with the platform, and probably most platforms, and you build a good habit around it as a coach and also as a player, taking 10-15 minutes to work through a module, then it just becomes, all right, I've invested time in this, I've invested money, and we know it's something that will help, and it just becomes a little bit easier to make that sustainable throughout the course of the season.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Sporting Global podcast. And today I'm here with Nick, all the way from West Coast. I mean, like, you're technically in Chicago right now, but I mean, like, Colorado, usually. So how are you, Nick?
I'm doing well. How about you?
I'm doing well. Well, it's a pleasure having you here. And how's I guess your stay in Chicago these days?
It's good. I've been out here for 4 or 5 days. So I used to live here when I worked for U.S. Soccer Federation for like 6 months after graduating, when I was still kind of getting the business up and running. So I spent the first like 10 years of my life here as well. So it always has a special place. Fun city. It's been raining for like the last 3 days, but otherwise it's good to get back.
A lot of history in Chicago. So it's right. It's I guess like you kind of look at it as your second home, though, in a sense.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, plenty of friends here, some family remaining out here as well. So whenever I can get back, it's usually easy enough to come back and see some people. So
right. Well, it's a pleasure having you here, and we're gonna dive a little bit into obviously your journey in the sport industry, a little bit about like what you're doing at SportsLab360. Like a very interesting company and a startup in the sports tech or football tech world, I would say, more specifically. But before we kind of like dive into that, I just wanted to like know a little bit about how your journey in the sport industry began. Take us kind of like through, I guess, where you started and sort of like where you are right now.
Yeah, absolutely. So, got thrown into soccer when I was maybe 4 or 5 years old, as a good alternative to American football, or I guess other sports. So got pretty into that. Once you hit 11, 12 years old is, usually I think when a lot of people it becomes more serious for them. And so at that time we moved from Chicago to Minnesota, joined a couple clubs that were, some of the higher level ones that were hopefully putting me on a path to compete at a higher level post club soccer. So obviously played through high school and played club at that time, and then ended up at Drake, which is small Division I school in Des Moines, Iowa. Which if you've heard of Des Moines, Iowa, I'll be impressed.
No.
But, good place.
I wouldn't say that, but I mean, like, yeah. I'll just pretend I did,
There you go. So yeah, like small Midwest state. So played 4 years there, and then throughout high school, I think I started coaching when I was maybe 15 years old. So from the perspective of obviously just earning some extra money on the side, and then also being able to stay in the game, stay in the field, work with younger players, and be able to view the game through a different lens, was super helpful. So really, it was really ultimately a matter of playing soccer, falling in love with the sport. And then, I play when I can now, when there's a good adult league kind of going on, but for the most part, the boots are hung up, we'll call it. So.
Are you still doing some coaching as well, or how long
you
like go on the coaching journey, I guess?
Yeah, so I was like pretty, I guess I can't say full time with it, but I was for probably 6 or 7 years. I would take a team or two and be kind of full time as a head coach for a couple different clubs. And then around the time that I started SportsLab360, it just became too much to try to balance that with much else. So I still, kind of jump in and do less formal coaching when I can. But as it becomes, in the last couple of years, I've had certainly more, I guess, free time than the first 2 years of starting the business. So I think in the near future, it'll be something I can jump back into a little bit more seriously. So yeah, it was good. It was good to start on that side of things and just put yourself in, basically across the aisle from players and see kind of how they're perceiving you and what is effective in working with them. So
right, and it's a good way, I guess, of working to become a leader as well, in a sense of like just getting that leadership experience, and also like, very young, starting at like, 15, 16 years old. I was actually very similar as well. Like I started my coaching when I was 16. So I kind of know that kind of like mentally going in there and just, trying to get to know yourself, like building kind of like, all this, structure and tactics and all this stuff. And it's a good learning experience, I think, for a lot of people. And especially like, if you love soccer or football, whatever people want to call it, then, it's sort of like a great way to just, again, as you were saying, like staying, in touch with the game, being part of it, regardless if you're, going to become like a big, star or not. It's a great way of, also seeing a different side, I guess, of the space, because once you, put on, I guess, the coaching hat, it's suddenly a lot of different kind of responsibilities. And I have to ask you though, since you both also were like player and coach, how, like, did you, like, I thought a lot about this myself, but did you notice like any difference in terms of like your, I guess, composure as a coach compared to a player? Like, were you any different?
That's a good question. I would say I don't remember ever. I do think I did a decent job as a coach of kind of like keeping things in check. And I wasn't coaching at least early on at a super high level.
Sure.
So it was like, okay, like I need to remain aware that a lot of these players are out here, first and foremost to enjoy it, and maybe
right.
Some of them have ambitions to play in college or beyond, but a lot of them don't. So I think it was maybe, especially after I think the first year with like, your first year as a coach and you're ready to get out there and like, you're still probably a little too focused on results and that sort of thing.
Right.
But I don't ever remember like, getting thrown out of games or anything like that.
Yeah. No, I'm like
shouting matches. And then, as a player, it kind of just fluctuates. I mean, I think once you get placed in like a college environment where, you're no longer one of the best players on the field, then it becomes just like I think a lot of people, have the same challenge where it's like, you got to recalibrate yourself and learn to play in a quicker environment that, where you're surrounded with people who are, as good and better than you. So I would say there was probably more composure through the coaching side, especially just with that next level.
Very interesting. No, I mean, like I think it's very fascinating because I always saw myself as a very calm player. So I never like, I was very like kind player. I mean, like I did my part, but I was never like complaining or anything like that. I just did my stuff and I was doing it well and I shut up, But as a coach, I was a different person. I was like, what happened?
Really?
Like, yeah, I mean, like, it's very fascinating. I became very loud out of it, which was very, very interesting. I didn't expect that, it was like going from like being sort of like that person who was like keeping everyone else in check. And I mean, like, of course, like I was, being composed, but I was like much more, involved, in a sense, like verbally, but obviously you kind of feel like you have to because you want to, actively coach and everything. But it was just like, I felt like I was like, as a coach, I'm much more kind of like just, it was very fascinating for me. I didn't expect that, so that's why I thought it was interesting to like bring that up because I was like, maybe that's just me. Maybe I'm just weird in that sense.
I think it might be.
But
I do feel like most people, I mean, if you're on the field, obviously you're in the heat of the moment. There's, at least for me, more emotion there than coaching. So
right.
I mean, there were probably much more moments when unproductive things were shouted as a player compared to a coach. But
very, very, very fascinating. I mean, like I just swapped it,
Yeah, exactly.
But anyways, let's talk a little bit about like obviously, SportsLab360 and like just tell us a little about what it's all about and how the idea came to life first and foremost.
Yeah, awesome. So yeah, I mean, throughout playing and throughout coaching, and maybe you've heard this too, but you hear, especially in the last, I don't know, 5 to 10 years, and probably before that, but soccer IQ, football IQ has become such a buzzword, and a lot of people are doing it well as far as coaching it and like putting actual things in place to address it. And then I think there is still a bit of a epidemic of people maybe realizing that it's important and even talking about it a decent amount, but like when it comes to actually prioritizing that as a component of player development, you still don't see it completely across the board. So as a player, it was something that I noticed. I could do an okay job of coming up with certain drills or activities to do solo in my yard, for example, to work on speed or technique or anything else. But when it was actually came down to learning the game, which, as everybody says, is such a big part, obviously it is, that was something that you were kind of left on your own as a player. You can go on YouTube and you'll get lucky half the time with a good video. The other half will just be like some guy just kind of just stream of consciousness on a whiteboard type of thing, where you're like, as a player, you're like, I don't even know if this is correct. And even if it is, where does that fit in conceptually and I guess in the bigger context of the game. So for me, it was all about, empowering players to be able to, tackle that area of the development on their own. And really just putting something in their hands. And secondarily, it is a tool for coaches to be able to like have a little bit more, some more touch points with their players, so that when they're not in training, their players can still be learning the game. So quick version of how it came about was, really through that journey, realizing there was a need for it. My senior year of college, there was a pitch competition to win a little bit of money to start a business. So me and my business partner at the time kind of threw something together last minute and presented it, and we're able to get a little bit of money to kind of get it started, and got in like this program for the summer. And from there it kind of just kept going. So it was a typical founder story of working on it in the dorms and all that, and so all good.
So it's like soon it's gonna be like the Facebook story.
Yeah, I think we're trending in that direction. Yeah, a couple more billion users, but
so just that down the line, of course. But
yeah, exactly.
Starting at the dorm room. No, but that's great, and I guess I want to, because you mentioned obviously player perspective but also coach perspective. Take us a little bit through like, I guess, each of those journeys as a player but also as a coach, just so like get an essence of, okay, if I'm a player, like how does it benefit me, and if I'm a coach, like how can I utilize it?
Yeah, exactly. So basically the platform is made up of individual modules. So a module is maybe 10 to 15 minutes. It's all online, so players are completing it, with their laptops or tablets, phones, whatever. And the modules focus on different tactical principles. So if, let's say you're a coach and you're working on switching play that week in training, you would log into SportsLab360, you'd find the module on switching play, hopefully work through it yourself so you know what you're presenting to your players. And you can also like customize it and put some notes in so your players are kind of seeing those as they go through. And you would then assign that module to your players to be completed before training. So that way they're showing up, and the dialogue during training as you're kind of working through the session itself is a little bit more contextual for them, and they have something to kind of like tie it back to. So basically, coaches, from the coach perspective, you're making assignments, you're assigning our modules to your players, you're tracking their progress. There's, a variety of ways to do that. You're customizing the content. And then there is a session plan library that we offer so that you can kind of connect the final dot and, have some session plans to tap into to address that tactical principle. And then for the players, it's pretty straightforward. You will receive assignments from your coach. you'll log in and then you'll work through each module. And each module is basically has a video component. So it uses like real game film to kind of like introduce the topic and show some different examples.
Right.
And then they move on to the lesson, which is a 3D animated kind of interactive experience where it plays out different scenarios, and then it'll pause at a certain moment and ask the player, all right, based on what you learned, which option is the best? And obviously we're always explaining the why behind it and kind of running under the assumption that there isn't necessarily best, but you have to kind of start somewhere. So and then they move on to a quiz at the end. So that's where, coaches are actually tracking the progress for players.
Yeah, and I think that's a very, key lesson to it too, is sort of like testing what they're seeing, not only just on the field, but sort of like, being aware of, okay, what kind of decision would you make? Because at the end of the day, I mean, like football, soccer, it's all about making the right decisions, and like in reading the game. And at the end of the day, it's just a lot of decisions. And so, like it's always like this saying, right? It's that it's not always that, your, I guess like your opponent is, or like that your team is doing well in order to score. It might be just that the opponent are doing mistakes. Like a lot of goals comes up out of mistakes. So it's sort of like, again, how do you capitalize on making the smart decisions, right? So I think that's a very, very key lesson. And talking a little bit about like, I guess like the business model on this, and I guess because, obviously, can players directly buy it, or is it just more like you kind of like targeting clubs, leagues and so forth that are, okay, they're buying this as a service for their coaches, and then they kind of like, branch it out, I guess, to their players? How does it work, essentially, the model?
Yeah, so I'd say when we launched a few years ago, it was certainly more focused on selling to clubs. They use it as a club, and then teams as well, like a lot of high school teams.
Right.
I'd say it was always, a plan to not shift away from clubs. We still build features that, aren't even available to individual purchasers, like that are team features and different things like that. So that will always be a priority, but we've kind of shifted more focus onto individual subscriptions. So as a player, you can jump on the website, subscribe, get an individual license, and be able to have access to all the content right away. So it has shifted more in that direction, but like I said, we're always building out new features to keep it as something that clubs are going to use. Because in a perfect world, you want, if you can have a coach who's bought into it and a team of players that are all bought into it, which at high levels of youth is certainly reasonable. I mean, most of their players and parents are going to be pretty involved. So, in those cases, having coaches who are using it with their teams as a whole, and then there is actually dialogue happening the next day or the next week in training, I think that's when it becomes even more effective. So, always trying to continue to drive that as well.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I guess, just looking a little bit back to, what we've been through to the last, I guess, 2 years now with the pandemic. And I mean, I can't believe it's almost been 2 years, which is kind of nuts in itself. But I guess what kind of, lessons did you learn from, working on this through the pandemic, kind of sports stopping, completely, no games, a lot of individual practice, I guess, but how did that sort of adapt? How did you guys sort of adapt to that new situation that came through it?
Yeah. So, I mean, we were one of the, the rare ones that honestly benefited, at least for the first probably 4 or 5 months. It's kind of funny looking at our Google Analytics. It's it wasn't flat before or after, but it looks flat because of how much the onset of that spiked it. So it was a crazy few months. I'd say the biggest thing, I don't even want to say, the lesson of being prepared, because no one can actually be prepared for something like that happening.
Right.
But being having enough in place where you are in a position to be prepared. And with that too, also understand, being comfortable, I guess, in a somewhat chaotic state was helpful. I mean, there were certainly plenty of nights, like the first few months, where it was kind of just nonstop. There'd be a few new clubs each day that they're interested in, getting all of those set up, while also trying to balance and juggle the other pieces. Was difficult, but I mean, also exciting. I mean, when you're working, spent the first 2 years working, building up a program, making $0 for 2 years because we, didn't have a market ready platform. And then, it's becomes easier to work, throughout the night type of thing during that boost.
Right.
But the other piece is, I mean, yeah, I'd say flexibility, comfortability, and chaos. And I'd say just being flexible with understanding that everybody also reacts to something like this in a different way, and not trying to like look at things in a macro perspective. Even if it meant more work, like if one club is like, hey, we don't have the budget to like do one of your traditional plans at 4 months or 12 months, working with them, being like, all right, we can get you access for 4 weeks. Here's what it'll cost. At the end of the day, you're sort of just throwing something out there, because there isn't a playbook for all of it. But just understanding that people and clubs, organizations all are they're going through their own journey with it, and just being open to working in any possible way with them. And at the end of the day, making sure that if they want the resource, they're able to have access to it. So.
Right. And I guess it also kind of shifted, a little bit your marketing strategy in terms of like also, I guess, targeting all those hungry players that are like sitting at home, weren't able to go to team practices, right? Which was, for quite a long time, that, people can, practice together either almost, or play games and stuff like that. And then in that sense, also like it becomes like, well, okay, if you want to have like something extra, that can help you, you can buy this service, right, from you guys, or like maybe, because I guess like, from a standpoint of a club too, in a pandemic situation, is that, financially it hurts, it really hurted everyone, right? So it's kind of like, do we have the budget, or can we also like offer this, I guess, in a sense, as a tool and a solution for the players to, okay, if you want to, have some extra, then this is a great way, but you have to kind of like maybe buy it yourself or something like that. How did you sort of like, I guess, go around like that from a marketing standpoint?
Yeah, I mean, to kind of break it down between like club, team, and individual. I mean, individuals are always pretty straightforward.
Sure.
I'll work with them like when they reach out type of thing. But for the most part, like individuals kind of remain the same. There's obviously more activity from them. You have parents or players going on, and realizing that they're not going to be training for a while, and then they need something. So that's pretty straightforward. With clubs and directors, I didn't really have too much time to reach out to them. In a lot of cases, it was them realizing that, all right, we have the next at the time, we might have a whole month of this pandemic, God forbid.
A month.
So in like those cases, they were the ones that were primarily kind of reaching out. So honestly, it was just a matter of having like a personal conversation with each of them. There is only one of me, but like at the same time, if you're talking to a few clubs a day, it's manageable. So it's just figuring out what their needs are for their players. Maybe you can get access for the whole club. Maybe we have to pick the certain amount of teams that get access to it. But it really is like there's not for me at least, there wasn't like a one size fits all answer to getting those clubs taken care of type of thing.
I guess like the title of this video, how 1 month of pandemic ended up to 2 years.
Yeah, seriously. I mean, even the time was like, wow, can't believe we're gonna be in this thing for like a month, maybe 2.
I remember like back when things really kicked off, and I was like, people were like, we'll be fine by summer. I'm like, yeah, no.
I was one of those people. I was like, this can't happen.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'll hopefully in like 2 or 3 years now, we're not looking back on this conversation and laughing. Although we haven't made any, claims about when it's going to end.
Hey,
so
we've
learned.
Are we gonna like put on a date or something like that?
I think we have to. Yeah.
It's gonna end at. I don't even want to say it. Like it's just I mean, like I feel like we're at a positive point at least. So I mean, like from our side, I mean, like Norway is open like fully now. So I mean, like we're kind of like in a good spot, at least.
Yeah.
But again, we're only 5.5 million people, so it's a little bit different.
Yeah. I didn't realize
But
that's small. Yeah. We're just all over the place here.
so but I wanted to talk a little bit, of course, like the value of digital tools, for players and for coaches, especially during, I guess, pandemic and that, I guess, demand for digital tools has rapidly increased in general, in a sense. But and we talked a little bit about like, okay, how these directors, clubs were reaching out to you, and it's sort of like, okay, it's a pandemic, but I guess like how did, I guess, the value of these digital tools sort of like increase or get impacted, or like how did it impact essentially the demand that was happening in the market for you guys during the pandemic?
Yeah. So definitely a big kind of increase in demand, and it was interesting because 5, 6, 7 months after, clubs went from like that initial like 2 weeks of like, okay, we need to, like, we still have a budget because we're, this was so recent that we can, spend money on a tool to make sure our players are still engaged and developing. And then fast forward like 5 or 6 months, and that's part of the reason we shifted a lot more towards individuals, is because clubs, after a period of time of not having players come in and registration fees stopping or getting cut in half, they were pretty much in a position to not have even something like this that is a remote platform, and is obviously helpful at this time. It isn't technically essential. So for a lot of clubs, it was like, we really want to, but like we can't spend a dime for another tool that's not completely necessary right now. So, and then like in general, like you said, like obviously technology's been trending forward since we've been alive, but I think what maybe was learned by a lot of clubs, and I remember it in college too, is there's so much really good technology out there for player development. It's just a matter of like such a matter of how you implement it. Like I know there are so many resources that a team or an individual coach or a club will use, and like they'll pay a lot of money for it, and it's like you still need to like implement it and like be intentional every day and every week about how you're using it, and then you'll get a ton out of it. And that's the same with SportsLab360. So you could subscribe and never use it. You're obviously not going to get value from it. So I think that has, previously when we were in person, it was like, okay, we can afford to like invest in something, use it maybe to 30, 40, 50, 60% of its, ability, because we have in person. And I think with COVID, it was, people realized, we need to, if we're going to be spending on, SportsLab360 or any other platform out there, we need to make sure that we're getting like at least 80, 90, hopefully like 100% value from it. So it just changed the way that people approach it, and how intentional and thought out they are with actually using it. So
I think you're talking about something really important though here, and that's kind of like, at the end of the day, like people can buy tools and services, but if they don't utilize it, or if they don't kind of like go in, okay, learn how to do it, like spend the time utilizing what the value is in there, then it's sort of like, well, I mean, like, yes, you can buy the tool, but you have to like put down some effort in order to make things work. It's like you have a lot of great resources out there, but if you don't utilize it, like, of course, it's not going to like bring a lot of value until you use it. That's the whole point, if it's so that's sort of like a key lesson, I guess, where people are kind of like expecting where, okay, we buy this tool, now you're going to make our players, 80% better. They're like, well, yes, but only if you actually use it. Right.
Yeah, exactly. There's not yet a solution that does that part for you. You still have to be engaged with it, and
probably never.
No, probably not. Yeah. So that's been, but I mean, hopefully that's kind of helped make people more aware of that, as we hopefully move out of it. So
Well, I think also for you guys, right? It got a lot more eyes, on yourself there, and sort of like people testing it, people understanding, okay, like this is a valuable tool if we have sort of like the I guess the resources or the people to get involved in learning it and utilizing it to the players and coaches and so forth. And I mean, like that also will come like with, I guess, like the shift of like, the clubs getting more revenue, like having more members again and being more activity, like that sort of like value, I guess, also shifts to like, okay, now we can spend that time or that resources to utilize it the fullest.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, that's like part of the, I don't know, somewhat of like confirmation bias. If you're spending money on something or you're investing time in it, then it kind of helps itself along.
Yeah.
So, usually if you can get a good first few weeks with the platform, and probably most platforms, and you build a good habit around it as a coach and also as a player, taking 10, 15 minutes to work through a module, then it just becomes, all right, I've invested time in this, I've invested money, and we know it's something that will help. And it just becomes a little bit easier to make that sustainable throughout the course of the season.
To sort of like wrap up here though, I guess, from a more, I guess, entrepreneurial slash, professional standpoint where, we have a lot of young, students and professionals who are like tuning in here, trying to learn, what to do in the big world of sports and football and all this fancy stuff. And I guess like, what tips do you have for them that are looking for a career, I guess, in football technology and maybe also, working with players and coaches? What are some of the, things that you learned speaking with all these, directors, coaches now that you see, okay, this is some areas where they need help or where, football technology can be a very useful resource?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I mean, I guess and I'm sure most people probably say this, but putting yourself out there and like actually trying to get, and saying this somewhat ironically now, but trying to get in person in front of different people, and different companies, like going to the United Soccer Coaches Convention, for example. You have, I don't even, 12 or 13,000 or something. I'm probably way off on that number, but a lot of soccer coaches going out, and there's probably 80 or 90 different football technology companies to choose from, and you can walk up to anybody and have a conversation about it and learn a little bit more about what direction you might want to go, as an individual. So I mean, that's the biggest thing. Like there are clearly enough out there, and I think there are also so many like in an early stage. We're still relatively early. Like you guys have been, you guys have been around for.
Yeah, I mean, like we released technically our public beta in January 2020, so we're still pretty
young. There you go. Yeah. So there's like so many that are still in the, or even like pre-growth phase, that could be good opportunities to get involved with, and maybe if you're taking your first or second job, you're probably not starting off at the top by any means, but that's kind of what's exciting about starting with a new company that's maybe they're doing something completely different, or maybe they're filling a need that has been attempted to be filled but hasn't yet. So really just finding what mission you can get behind. I mean, that sounds cliche, but that kind of comes down to that. If you're not working for a company that you're believing in, especially if you're going into sports technology, you're probably doing it because you have a passion for player development or making things generally easy for coaches, players, etc. So finding out like what the ultimate kind of why is for you, and then from there you got enough companies to choose from, and people are generally friendly, so just reach out, make an introduction. If you can do it in person, even better. But getting out there, knowing that there'll be some rejection, but mostly good conversations, and learning, even a conversation that doesn't end up with a job, you now have a greater picture of what the sports industry looks like. So you can't go wrong opening as many doors as possible, I'd say.
I think that's it's a very good advice. And I mean, like, who knows, maybe there's coming a few, I don't know, SportsLab360 internships opportunities.
Yeah, we've had them before. Yeah.
Yeah. So like, I think we gotta, post something on Sporting Global soon.
We do. Yeah. I think we got a meeting like next week about it. So
let's do it.
We're on it.
Yeah, I mean, like, I think if there's also like one key lesson here to sort of like wrap up with what you were saying is, put like go to the places where your audience is, you know, like you were talking about the conventions, right? Where like these coaches are, and like, you know, be at those places, you know, and talk with them. Even if you don't necessarily know what you're going to do yet, it's the perfect way to kind of like just pick people's brains, see what's going on, see how the, you know, market is moving, and understanding like also in that, I guess it's almost like an ocean, right? In these convention stuff, like companies that are, you know, helping out and doing different kind of things, and sort of like getting an eye of like what is important, you know, talking with the coaches and understanding like what are they working on, and just, you know, being part of that ecosystem. It's also like, you know, I had like someone else as well talking like, yeah, it's cool that you're maybe going there once, but if you go there like, you know, 2, 3, 4, maybe 5 times, people will see your face because it's still a lot of the same people going every year. And then you're sort of like, oh, I saw you last year. Who are you again, right? And then you sort of like becoming a part of that network, that community, and that opens a lot of doors and opportunities. I think that's a, you know, a very key lesson that you're bringing up here. You know, being present in those places.
Yeah, exactly. And like you said, yeah, it doesn't happen overnight, but if you're committed to it for, you know, a few years, you can like, make a huge difference in who you have access to. And I'd say more objectively, LinkedIn Premium. I think I did like you can do like a 30-day trial or something, and then you're
we're like
It's more global.
Right, exactly.
That's true. Yeah, that one's on me.
That one is you. We're gonna cut that right out.
Yeah, get that out of there.
Oh, it's all good. No, but Nick, I would like to thank you, you know, so much for joining us, you know, and for taking the time to sharing your story with us, and also some good tips about your journey. Of course, we're excited to see where, you know, SportsLab360 will go, you know, moving forward. But it's an exciting market, and it's a place where, you know, now more than ever, you know, like people, you know, need to do things from home. They need to also like, you know, be more, I guess, have to be like the balance between like getting the direct coaching and doing stuff on yourself. And everybody knows as well, if you're going to be, you know, the best, you have to work a lot on your free time, on the spare time, to practice, to learn. And as you said as well, like, you know, learning how to make the smart decisions. So it's a good tool, and we wish you, you know, all the best, you know, moving forward. I don't know if you have any closing remarks.
Not really. I'm still trying to figure out how to backpedal my way out of out of the endorsement there. So no, I mean, yeah, I need to jump on, and when we connected, like it had been like 6 months, right? I mean, it was a while ago. Yeah. So I mean, it's when we connect next week, I would appreciate a full intro into the actual program, because it's like peripherally I've kept in touch with you guys, but would be good to hear what's changed and all that. But no, closing remarks. I mean, nothing groundbreaking. It was good to chat with you. And I think as you learned the same thing going through the past couple of years, it's just thinking on your feet, trying to open doors, you know, not taking anything, being open to the chaos of everything, and you know, putting yourself out there. So yeah, it was good to connect, and yeah, glad we could make it happen.
Absolutely. Well, we have like a tradition here in the Sporting Global podcast that we're forcing every guest to do, and so we have to teach you a little bit Norwegian, Nick. You know?
Yeah, let's do it.
That's how it does. So with every video we do, we always finish with "Vi snakkes," which means "see you later" in Norwegian. So that's what you gotta say.
Vi snakkes?
There you go. See it.
The pronunciation's probably pretty bad on your end.
Yeah, huh? You're doing well. You're doing well. It's it is one of the good ones. You're one of the good ones.
He's nice. All right, I might have to learn Norwegian apparently.
You have to now. There's no other option. You know.
Yeah, I'm on it.
Awesome, Nick. All right. Thank you so much, and we'll talk very soon.
Sounds good. Thanks a lot, Martin.
Bye-bye.